They studied Earth's pull, and still weren't ready for her. The Villani had watched Earth for 300 years. They sent probes. They took pictures. They measured everything they could measure. The gravity was strong, much stronger than their home world. The weather was wild and dangerous. Earthquakes shook the ground. Volcanoes spat fire. Storms tore across the oceans with enough power to flatten cities. And yet, life existed there. Not just existed, it thrived. The Villani scientists wrote thousands of reports about Earth. They studied the predators with sharp teeth. They studied the tiny creatures that caused disease. They studied the radiation from the yellow sun and the poison gases in the air. They concluded that Earth was one of the most dangerous planets in the known galaxy. They also concluded that humans were survivors. Tough, but limited. Strong for their size, but nothing special. The Villani had better technology, longer lifespans, and superior intelligence. First contact would be simple. Ambassador Telos was chosen to lead the mission. He was old and wise. He had made contact with 12 different species before. He knew how to be patient. He knew how to be careful. His tall body was fitted with a special suit that helped him move in Earth's heavy gravity. He practiced walking in simulation chambers for months before the journey. When his ship descended through the clouds above a city called Sol, Telos felt ready. He was not ready for Lieutenant Una Park. She was waiting for him at the landing site. Around her stood dozens of other humans. Soldiers in uniform, politicians in formal clothes, scientists with curious eyes. But Telos noticed Una first. She stood at the front of the security team, her posture straight, her dark eyes scanning everything. She was small. Very small. Telos was over 2 meters tall, and Una barely reached his chest. Her black hair was pulled back tight. Her face showed no emotion. She looked, to Telos, like a child playing soldier. He would later learn how wrong that thought was. The welcome ceremony was long and full of speeches. Telos listened politely. He gave his own speech about friendship between worlds. The humans clapped. Pictures were taken. Everything went according to plan. Then the drone appeared. It came from the east, moving fast and making a high buzzing sound. Later, investigators would determine it was a malfunction, a news drone with damaged navigation systems. But in that moment, nobody knew what it was. Nobody knew if it was a weapon. Telos saw the drone. His brain began processing the threat. His body began preparing to move. Among his people, he was considered to have fast reflexes. His reaction time was approximately 1.2 seconds. Una moved in less than half that time. She hit Telos from the side. The impact was shocking. Her small body carried far more force than he expected. They tumbled together across the ground, rolling behind a thick concrete barrier. Telos heard a crash, felt debris scatter nearby. When he opened his eyes, Una was already standing. Her weapon was in her hand. Her eyes swept across the area, searching for more threats. She looked calm. She looked like she had done this 1,000 times before. The other soldiers rushed over. Someone was shouting about the drone. Medical teams appeared, checking on the ambassador. Telos lay on the ground, his mind still trying to understand what had happened. His suit had recorded everything. He would watch the footage later, slowing it down frame by frame. He would see Una's eyes notice the drone. He would see her body explode into motion before his own brain had finished identifying the threat. He would measure her reaction time at 0.27 seconds. "Are you injured, Ambassador?" Una asked. She offered him her hand. Telos took it. Her grip was strong. He stood slowly, his suit helping him balance. "You are faster than our data suggested," he said. Una's expression did not change. "Your data probably measured us sitting still." In the days that followed, Telos thought about that moment often. The Villani had spent 3 centuries studying humanity. They had measured human muscles and human bones. They had calculated how fast humans could run and how high they could jump. They had numbers for everything. The numbers Talos was beginning to understand did not tell the whole story. He watched Una train with her soldiers. They woke before the sun rose. They ran until their bodies dripped with sweat. They fought each other with hands and feet, hitting hard enough to leave bruises. When one soldier fell, the others did not stop to help. They expected her to get up on her own. And she always did. "Why do you train so hard?" Talos asked Una one morning. "You have weapons, technology. Why practice fighting with your bodies?" Una finished her water and wiped her mouth. "Weapons can fail. Technology can break. But this," she tapped her chest, "this I can always count on. But you hurt yourselves. I have seen your soldiers limping. I have seen the bruises and cuts. This seems inefficient." Una smiled. It was the first time Talos had seen her smile, and he found it strangely unsettling. "Pain is just information," she said. "It tells us where our limits are. And once we know where the limit is, we can push past it." That night, Talos added a new section to his report. He titled it, "Observations on Human Psychology." Humans, he wrote, did not view their bodies as fixed things. They viewed them as tools that could be shaped and strengthened. Pain did not stop them. It guided them. Failure did not defeat them. It educated them. Where other species would rest, humans pushed harder. Where other species would accept their natural limits, humans refused. He thought about Una's words. Pain is just information. Among the Villani, pain was a warning. It meant stop. It meant danger. The idea of deliberately seeking pain, of using it as a teaching tool, was completely alien. Talos began to wonder what else the Villani had gotten wrong. He looked out his window at the city of Sol. Millions of humans lived there, stacked on top of each other in buildings that reached toward the sky. They moved through streets clogged with vehicles. They breathed air that his sensors said was barely acceptable. They lived their entire lives under gravity. That made every step a small act of strength. And they seemed happy. More than happy. They seemed to thrive. They laughed and argued and built things and tore them down and built them again. They created art and music and food that delighted the senses. They raised children in this hostile environment, and those children grew up strong. The Villani had studied Earth's gravity and concluded it was a burden. Perhaps, Talos thought, they should have considered another possibility. Perhaps it was a gift. He turned back to his report and began writing faster. There was so much to learn. So much the data had not captured. He had come to Earth expecting to meet survivors. He was beginning to suspect he had met something else entirely. They studied Earth's pull, and still weren't ready for her. The Villani research station in the mountains was supposed to be safe. The scientists had chosen the location carefully. It was far from the busy cities. It was quiet and peaceful. It was the perfect place to study Earth's environment without distractions. They had not planned for the avalanche. It came on a winter morning, without warning. One moment the mountain was still. The next moment it was moving. Thousands of tons of snow and ice broke free and roared down the slope like an angry giant. The sound was louder than anything the Villani had ever heard. The eastern wing of the station disappeared in seconds. 4 Villani researchers were inside, trapped under 12 meters of frozen debris. Their emergency signals began broadcasting immediately, but the rescue teams were far away. 6 hours, at minimum, before help could arrive. 6 hours was too long. The trapped researchers would run out of air in 3. Sergeant Do-Hyun Lee heard the distress call on his radio. He was stationed at a small military outpost 15 kilometers away. His job was simple: monitor the area, report any problems, Stay out of trouble. He did not stay out of trouble. Do-hyun gathered his emergency equipment, a shovel, a thermal scanner, ropes, basic survival gear, and headed toward the research station. His commanding officer ordered him to wait for the rescue team. Do-hyun turned off his radio. The Vallani at the main station watched him approach on their sensors. One human, alone, walking into a disaster zone with nothing but hand tools. They assumed he was coming to assess the situation, to gather information and wait for real help. They did not expect him to start digging. Do-hyun found the buried wing and studied the debris for exactly 47 seconds. Then he picked up his shovel and began to dig. The snow was packed hard by the force of the avalanche. Each shovelful was heavy. The temperature was -15 degrees. Wind cut through his clothing like knives. He kept digging. "This is not logical," said Vallani observer Pelos, watching the human work. "He cannot possibly reach the trapped researchers alone. The volume of debris is too great. He will exhaust himself and die. Should we tell him to stop?" asked another scientist. Pelos considered this. He must already know. The mathematics are simple. He is choosing to dig anyway. For the first hour, Do-hyun made steady progress. His military training had made him strong and efficient. He created a channel into the snow, following the signals from the trapped researchers. His movements were precise and controlled. By the second hour, the cold began to affect him. His fingers grew numb inside his gloves. His breath came in shorter gasps. Ice formed on his eyebrows and the edges of his face mask. He slowed down, but he did not stop. At the third hour, his own thermal signature began to change. The Vallani sensors showed his core body temperature dropping. His heart was working harder to pump blood to his extremities. He was entering the early stages of hypothermia. Still, he dug. "He is aware that he is dying," Pelos said quietly. The research team had gathered around the monitors, watching in disbelief. "Our readings are clear. He knows exactly what is happening to his body." And he continues, "Why?" Someone asked. No one had an answer. The snow shifted twice during the fourth hour. Both times, Do-hyun nearly disappeared under new debris. Both times, he clawed his way out and continued working. His movements were slower now, clumsier. His body was shutting down piece by piece. When the rescue teams finally arrived, they found Do-hyun on his knees at the bottom of a pit he had carved by hand. His shovel had broken an hour ago. He was scraping at the ice with his bare fingers. His gloves lay abandoned in the snow. They had become too frozen to use. He had reached all 4 researchers. The rescue workers pulled him out first. His skin was the color of old paper. His hands were curled into stiff claws, the fingers blackened by frostbite. He could not stand on his own. They wrapped him in thermal blankets and carried him to a heated tent. 3 of the trapped researchers were alive. The 4th had not survived. The initial impact of the avalanche had been too severe. But 3 lives had been saved because one human had refused to do the logical thing. Do-hyun lay in the medical tent, hooked to machines that slowly warmed his frozen blood. A Vallani medic stood beside him, adjusting the equipment. The medic species did not have facial expressions the way humans did, but something in its posture suggested confusion. "You almost died," the medic said. Do-hyun's voice was barely a whisper. His throat was raw from hours of breathing frozen air. "Did they make it?" 3 of the 4 survived. "Because of you." Do-hyun closed his eyes. Some of the tension left his damaged body. "The 4th one," he said. "Tell me about the 4th one." The medic hesitated. "Researcher Keth. She was killed in the initial collapse. There was nothing you could have done." Do-hyun was quiet for a long time. When he opened his eyes again, they were wet. "I should have been faster," he said. The medic did not understand. This human had nearly killed himself saving strangers. He had pushed his body past every reasonable limit. He had succeeded against impossible odds. And his response was to wish he had done more. Why? The medic asked. Why did you do this? You did not know these researchers. You are not responsible for them. You could have waited for help. Do-hyun looked at the medic with eyes that were ancient with exhaustion. They needed help, he said simply. I could help. So I helped, but the risk to yourself didn't matter. The medic added this conversation to the growing file of human observations. It would be studied by scientists across the galaxy for decades to come. They would analyze Do-hyun's actions from every possible angle. They would create theories and write papers and hold conferences. None of them would truly understand. Humans did not calculate value the way other species did. They did not weigh their own survival against the survival of others and choose the logical option. When they saw someone in need, something inside them, something deeper than logic, demanded action, even if it killed them. Do-hyun lost 2 fingers to frostbite. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital. When he was released, he returned to his duties without complaint. When asked about the incident, he seemed uncomfortable with the attention. I just did what anyone would do, he said, but that was not true. Other species would not have done what he did. Other species would have waited for proper rescue. Other species would have followed the math. Humans, the galaxy was learning, did not follow the math. They followed something else entirely. They studied Earth's pull and still weren't ready for her. The Vellani research team arrived 3 weeks after Ambassador Telos. There were 12 of them. All scientists, all eager to study humanity up close. They set up their equipment in a building near the center of Seoul. They prepared their instruments and their notebooks. They were ready to gather data. Dr. Hannah Kim was assigned to help them. She was a xenobiologist, a scientist who studied alien life. Before the Vellani came, her job had been mostly theoretical. She studied old signals from space. She made guesses about what alien creatures might look like. Now, suddenly, she had real aliens standing in front of her. It was the most exciting thing that had ever happened in her career. Researcher Melas was the leader of the Vellani team. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and large black eyes that never seemed to blink. He followed Hannah everywhere, asking questions and taking notes. At first, the questions were simple. What do humans eat? How do humans reproduce? Why do humans wear different colors of clothing? Hannah answered patiently, explaining the basics of human life. But soon, the questions became stranger. You have been working for 14 hours, Mela said one evening. He stood in the doorway of Hannah's office, watching her type on her computer. This is your 3rd consecutive day of working more than 12 hours. Why? Hannah shrugged without looking up. The report is due tomorrow. I need to finish it. But your body requires rest. Our medical scanners show elevated stress hormones in your blood. Your reaction time has slowed by 18%. You are operating at reduced capacity. I know. Melas waited for more explanation. None came. You know that you are damaging yourself, he said slowly. And you continue anyway. This is not logical. Hannah finally looked up. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was messy. She held a cup of coffee in her hand, her 5th cup that day. The Vellani had learned that coffee was a stimulant drug that humans consumed in enormous quantities. The report has to be finished, Hannah said simply. My body can recover later. Right now, the work is more important. Melas added this to his notes. He created a new category called willful biological override. It described the human tendency to ignore signals from their own bodies. Hunger, thirst, exhaustion, pain. Humans acknowledged these things, but they did not always obey them. They could choose to keep going. The Vellani could not do this. When a Vellani body said stop, the Vellani stopped. The idea of fighting against your own flesh was disturbing to them. But what disturbed Melos more was what happened the following weekend. Hannah's brother, Jiwoo, was running in a marathon. Hannah invited the research team to come watch. They stood near the end of the race course, surrounded by cheering humans, watching thousands of runners pass by. The marathon is 42 kilometers, Hannah explained. These runners have been going for hours. Melos watched with growing concern. Many of the runners looked terrible. Their faces were twisted with pain. Some were limping. A few had wet spots on their clothes where their skin had rubbed raw and started bleeding. Medical workers stood ready along the course, treating runners who collapsed. This seems cruel, Melos said. Why would anyone choose to do this? For the challenge, Hannah said. For the feeling of accomplishment. For fun? Fun? Melos repeated the word as if it were in a foreign language. They are clearly suffering. That's part of it. Jiwoo appeared in the distance. Hannah waved and cheered. A brother was at kilometer 38 near the end of the race. He looked exhausted. His legs seemed unsteady. Each step looked like a battle. And then Melos saw something that would stay with him forever. Jiwoo sped up. His body was failing. Every scanner Melos had confirmed this. Jiwoo's muscles were tearing microscopically with every stride. His hydration levels were dangerously low. His heart was pounding at maximum capacity. Everything about his physical state screamed stop, and yet Jiwoo ran faster. He's injuring himself, Melos said, alarmed. Significantly. Why is no one helping him? Why are you cheering? Hannah smiled with obvious pride. Because he's going to finish. Jiwoo crossed the finish line in 2 hours and 53 minutes. He stumbled forward, grabbed a railing, and bent over. His body shook. He coughed and then vomited onto the ground. Medical workers approached, but he waved them off. He stood straight, raised his arms, and smiled. He smiled. Melos stared. This made no sense. Jiwoo was in visible pain. His body had been pushed past all reasonable limits. He would need days to recover. The experience could not possibly have been pleasant, and yet the expression on his face was pure joy. I don't understand, Melos admitted. Hannah put her arm around her brother as he walked slowly toward them. Jiwoo's legs shook with each step, but his smile never faded. You know what my time was last year? Jiwoo asked. 3 hours and 12 minutes. Today I beat that by almost 20 minutes. But at what cost? Melos asked. Your body is damaged. You pushed yourself to the point of vomiting. Surely the time improvement is not worth the suffering. Jiwoo exchanged a look with his sister. Something passed between them, an understanding that Melos could not access. The suffering is the point, Jiwoo said. He took a bottle of water from a volunteer and drank deeply. Anyone can do easy things. Easy things don't mean anything. When you push through pain, when you keep going after your body begs you to stop, that's when you find out who you really are. He looked at Melos with eyes that were still red from exertion. I know you've been studying us. Jiwoo continued. Hannah told me. You want to understand humans. Here's your first lesson. We don't become strong by avoiding hardship. We become strong by choosing it. That night, Melos wrote the longest report of his career. He described the marathon in detail. He included biological data, psychological observations, and cultural analysis. But in the end, he admitted that he had failed to truly understand what he had witnessed. Humans, he wrote, have a relationship with suffering that no other species shares. They seek it out. They embrace it. They transform it into something they call growth. He thought about all the data the Villani had collected over 3 centuries. They had measured human bodies. They had analyzed human technology. They had predicted human behavior using mathematical models, but they had never considered this, that humans would deliberately choose pain. that they would view suffering not as something to avoid, but as something to pursue. The Villani had assumed that Earth's harsh conditions were a disadvantage. They had pitied humans for living on such a brutal world. Now, Malice wondered if they should have been afraid instead. If humans could do this to themselves, if they could push past every biological limit and smile while doing it, what else were they capable of? He looked out the window at the city lights of Seoul. Somewhere out there, Jiwoo was probably already planning his next marathon, already thinking about how to run faster, push harder, suffer more. The Villani had thought they were coming to study a primitive species. They were beginning to realize they had made a terrible miscalculation. They studied Earth's pull and still weren't ready for her. The Keth came without warning. Their ships appeared in Earth's sky on a cold morning in March, dark shapes blocking out the sun, casting shadows that stretched across entire cities. There were hundreds of them, arranged in perfect military formation. The Keth were conquerors. They had taken 43 worlds before Earth. Their methods were simple and efficient. Appear in overwhelming force, demand surrender, destroy anyone who refused. Most species surrendered. The ones who fought were crushed quickly. Earth was supposed to be there. 44th victory. They sent their message on every frequency. Surrender or be destroyed. Hand over your leaders. Accept Keth rule. You have 24 hours. Colonel Yoonji Choi was in command of the Seoul Defense Sector when the ultimatum arrived. She was 47 years old, with gray in her hair and scars on her hands from decades of service. She read the Keth message 3 times. Then she picked up her radio and gave the only order that mattered. Hold the city, whatever it takes. The Battle of Seoul would last 19 days. Later, historians would struggle to explain how it was possible. The Keth had orbital weapons that could level buildings from space. They had soldiers bred for war, equipped with armor that shrugged off bullets. They had vehicles that floated over the ground like ghosts. Colonel Choi had rifles, artillery, and roughly 15,000 soldiers. She should have lost in hours. She lasted nearly 3 weeks. The first day, the Keth landed troops on the outskirts of the city. They expected quick surrender once humans saw their strength. Instead, they found streets blocked with cars and debris, buildings converted into fortresses, and human soldiers who refused to run. The fighting was brutal. Keth plasma weapons turned soldiers to ash. Human bullets bounced off Keth armor. By sunset, over 2,000 humans were dead. The Keth commander sent another message. Surrender now, and some of you will be spared. Colonel Choi's response was to destroy the communications tower he was using. Day 3 brought a crisis. Keth forces surrounded a convoy of civilian buses, trying to evacuate the Eastern District. 4,000 people, families with children, elderly who could not fight, were trapped on a highway with enemy soldiers closing in. Colonel Choi did not hesitate. She gathered 500 soldiers and led them through an old subway tunnel that ran beneath the highway. They emerged behind the Keth lines, catching the enemy by surprise. The fighting lasted 6 hours. The tunnel became a choke point where Keth technology meant less than human determination. Soldiers fought in darkness, in tight spaces, with weapons and then with knives and then with hands. They held the line while the civilians escaped. 300 of the 500 soldiers died. Colonel Choi took a piece of shrapnel to the leg. She kept fighting. By day 7, the Keth were growing frustrated. They controlled the skies and the seas. They had more soldiers, better weapons, every advantage. Yet they could not break the human defenders. They offered terms. Surrender the city leaders and the military will be allowed to withdraw. Refuse and we will reduce the city to dust. Colonel Choi called a meeting of her officers. They gathered in a basement shelter, surrounded by maps covered in red marks showing enemy positions. Everyone was tired. Everyone was wounded in some way. Everyone knew the math. "We cannot win this," said Major Teeman Yu, her second in command. "Not in conventional terms. They will destroy the city before we can defeat them." "I know," Colonel Choi said. "Then what is the plan?" Colonel Choi looked at the map, at the thousands of soldiers depending on her, at the millions of civilians still hiding in shelters throughout the city. "We make them bleed," she said. "We make taking this city cost them so much that they think twice before attacking the next one. We show them that humans do not surrender." "That is not a victory," Taman said quietly. "No, but it is a message." The next 12 days were the worst in the city's history. The Keth pushed forward block by block. Humans retreated, but they made every meter cost. They booby-trapped buildings. They launched night raids that killed Keth officers in their sleep. They used drones to deliver explosives to enemy positions. On day 12, Colonel Choi was hit by plasma fire. The bolt struck her shoulder, burning through armor and flesh. Her officers wanted to evacuate her to a hospital. She refused. 4 hours later, her arm in a sling and her face gray with pain. She was back at the command post giving orders. The Keth began to experience something unfamiliar. Fear. Not fear of human weapons. Those remained inferior. Not fear of human numbers. They had killed many more than they had lost. But fear of human persistence. Fear of an enemy that would not stop. Fear of fighting creatures who seemed to welcome death if it meant taking one more Keth with them. On day 15, Keth soldiers began refusing to enter certain buildings. They had learned that humans would wait in ambush for hours, for days, without moving. They had seen humans pull the pins on grenades and hold them as Keth soldiers approached, choosing to die if it meant taking the enemy with them. On day 17, the first Keth unit attempted to retreat. Their commander had them executed. On day 19, everything changed. Ships appeared in the sky. Not Keth ships, but vessels from the Galactic Council. A coalition of species had finally agreed to intervene. The Keth were ordered to withdraw or face a war on multiple fronts. They withdrew. But before they left, the Keth commander made one final broadcast. "We have conquered 43 worlds," he said. "None of them fought like this. None of them cost us this much." His voice carried something new, something like respect or maybe horror. "This planet is not worth the price." The Battle of Seoul was over. The Villani embassy had recorded everything. They had watched the entire battle from their sensors and cameras, documenting each moment of the 19-day nightmare. They had data on human casualties, which were catastrophic. They had data on Keth casualties, which were unprecedented. They also had one interview, conducted hours after the ceasefire. Colonel Yoonji Choi sat in her command post, her wounded arm resting in its sling. Her uniform was burned and stained with blood. She had not slept in 4 days. The reporter asked her the question that everyone wanted answered. How did you hold? How did humans do what no other species has done? Colonel Choi considered the question. When she spoke, her voice was steady despite her exhaustion. "They thought we would break," she said. "They thought if they pushed hard enough, killed enough of us, we would give up. But they made a mistake. They assumed we were fragile because we are soft. They assumed we would surrender because surrender is logical." She leaned forward, and for a moment a reporter saw something ancient in her eyes, something that had been forged over millions of years of survival on a hostile world. "We are from Earth," Colonel Choi said. "We have been breaking and remaking ourselves since before we had language. Every disaster made us harder. Every enemy made us sharper. Every loss taught us what we could bear." She smiled, though there was no joy in it. "We have always been stronger at the broken places." That quote spread across the galaxy within hours. It was translated into hundreds of languages. It was studied and debated and feared. Because now the universe understood something it had not understood before. Humans were not survivors despite their planet. They were survivors because of it. They studied Earth's pull and still weren't ready for hurt. 10 years had passed since the first Valani ship descended through Earth's clouds. The world had changed in ways that would have seemed impossible to the humans of that earlier time. Spaceports lined the coastlines. Alien technology powered cities. Humans traveled to other worlds as easily as they once traveled to other countries. Ambassador Telos returned for the anniversary celebration. He was older now, his gray skin showing the patterns that his species developed with age. He had spent the past decade learning about humanity. He had written books and given lectures. He was considered the galaxy's foremost expert on human behavior. He still did not understand them. The celebration was held in Seoul, in the shadow of the Great Memorial Wall. The wall stretched for nearly a kilometer, covered with names carved in stone. Each name was a human who had died in the Battle of Seoul, or in the conflicts that followed, or in the countless acts of sacrifice that seemed to define the species. Telos found General Yuna Park standing before the wall. She was older too. There was gray in her black hair now, and new lines around her eyes. But she still carried herself with that same straight posture, that same quiet alertness. She was tracing a name with her fingers. Sergeant Do-Yun Lee. Telos read aloud. He remembered the file. The human who had nearly died digging through ice to save Valani researchers. I heard he passed 3 years ago. Yuna nodded. Her hand remained on the name. A refugee transport was attacked by pirates near the Mars colony. Do-Yun was on security duty. He got everyone to the escape pods. And himself? He stayed behind to hold the pirates off. Gave the pods enough time to launch. Telos was quiet for a moment. Of course, that was how Do-Yun had died. He could not imagine it happening any other way. I have studied your people for a decade, Telos said finally. I have read every report. I have watched thousands of hours of footage. I have interviewed hundreds of humans from every background and culture. And I still do not understand. Yuna looked at him. Understand what? Why you keep doing it? Fighting? Sacrificing? Pushing past every limit your biology should enforce. Telos gestured at the memorial wall, at the thousands upon thousands of names. You have no natural weapons. No armor or venom or claws. Your planet tries to kill you with every storm and earthquake and disease. By every logical measure, you should have died out long ago. But we didn't. No, you did not. And that is what I cannot understand. Yuna turned back to the wall. For a long moment, she did not speak. When she did, her voice was soft. There is a word in Korean, she said. Han. It does not translate well into other languages. We have tried, but something always gets lost. What does it mean? It is a kind of sorrow. Grief that accumulates over generations. From hardship and loss and injustice. From watching the people you love suffer. From suffering yourself. Telos nodded slowly. Accumulated grief. I understand the concept. No, Yuna said. You understand part of it. Han is not just sadness. It is sadness transformed. When you carry enough pain, when you have been broken enough times, something changes. The sorrow does not disappear, but it becomes something else. What does it become? Yuna smiled. It was the same smile Telos had seen on Ji-Woo's face at the end of the marathon. The same smile Do-Hyun had worn while being pulled from the ice. The same smile Colonel Choi had given after 19 days of impossible battle. Strength, Yuna said. Resilience. The refusal to be defeated by the things that hurt us. Han is looking at everything the universe throws at you and saying, I will not break. I will not stay broken. I will rise. She looked at Telos directly. Her eyes held something that he had seen in every human he had ever studied, but never quite named. That is what you got wrong in all your studies, Ambassador. You measured our gravity and our atmosphere and our predators. You cataloged everything that should kill us. You built models showing why we should not survive. But you never asked the right question. What question? Why we did survive. What we became because of it. She turned back to the memorial wall. The sun was setting behind the buildings of Seoul, casting long shadows across the carved names. Somewhere in the city, music was playing, the celebration continuing despite the solemnity of this place. Humans did that, Telos had learned. They mourned and celebrated at the same time. They held grief and joy in the same heart. We do not survive despite everything that tries to destroy us, Yuna said. We survive because of it. Every disaster made us harder. Every enemy made us sharper. Every loss taught us how much we could bear. And every time we broke, we rebuilt ourselves stronger. She ran her hand along the wall, touching name after name. You studied our planet and thought it was our weakness. You saw our struggles and felt pity for us. You measured our limits and assumed we would never exceed them. Her hand stopped on Do-yoon's name. Our planet is our teacher, Ambassador. She is cruel and beautiful and merciless. She has been training us for this since we first climbed down from the trees. Every storm, every drought, every predator and disease and disaster. She taught us that the only way to survive is to become something that cannot be stopped. Telos looked at the memorial, at the thousands of names, at the countless humans who had died saving others, fighting enemies, refusing to surrender, at the impossible species that should have been crushed by their own world. The Vellani have existed for much longer than humans, he said slowly. We have built great civilizations. We have achieved things your species is only beginning to imagine. But our world was kind to us. It gave us everything we needed. It asked nothing of us except to exist. He paused, considering his next words carefully. Perhaps that was not a gift. Perhaps it was a curse. Yuna did not respond. She did not need to. Telos thought about everything he had witnessed over the past decade. The marathon runner who had smiled while his body failed. The sergeant who had dug through ice with frozen fingers. The colonel who had held a city against impossible odds. The general who stood before him now, still serving, still fighting, still carrying the weight of all those names on the wall. The Vellani had thought they were the superior species. They had thought their technology and their long lives and their advanced minds made them better. They had come to Earth expecting to find primitive creatures struggling to survive. They had found something else. We called you impossible, Telos said. When the first reports came back, that was the word we used. Humans are impossible. They should not exist. Their survival defies all logic. And now? Telos looked at the memorial wall one last time. At the setting sun painting the stone in shades of gold and red. At the human beside him, still standing, still strong, still carrying the weight of generations. Now, he said, I think we finally understand. Understand what? That impossible is just another word for human. Yuna smiled. And in that smile, Telos saw everything his species had failed to measure. The pain transformed into strength. The sorrow transformed into defiance. The breaking and the rebuilding and the rising again. They had studied Earth's gravity, her storms, her predators. They had measured every way she tried to kill her children. And they had concluded that humans were survivors, tough, but limited by their world. They had never considered that Earth was not humanity's. Prison. She was their forge, and she had been making them ready for the stars since before they had. Names for the lights in the sky,